Thank you so much for having me. Just a quick note before I'll begin. Uh, Thank you, all of you, for joining. I know that you're doing it almost evening after evening. I actually was in the as a participant in a recent event that you have, and it's truly heartwarming to see how much all of you care and how devoted you are to Israel, especially during these horrific times that we're going through. And I know that it affects each and every one of you emotionally, but also in your communities. So I really appreciate it. And you should know that the people of Israel really appreciate your support. Secondly, just a technical comment, I live really close to the northern border, if to be specific, 4 miles from Lebanon. So we may hear some blast sound or so on. As long as there's no siren, it means that it's okay. It means that the noises are from our side. If there's going to be a siren, then you're going to have a terrific opportunity to meet my kids, because I'm actually at the safe room doing this Zoom call, and they will run in. Hopefully it won't happen, but I'm just giving you a heads up so you would know what to expect. So now if you can share my presentation, that would be amazing. Thank you. So as mentioned, I'm a political communication scholar, and I want to take the next 15 minutes or so to speak a little bit about public diplomacy, making the case of Israel, and the image war, which is a salient aspect of today's conflict, and I think all of us are feeling it now on a day-to-day basis. So our reality had changed dramatically in the last few decades because of different revolutions. We have a political revolution that made a lot of states become democracies following World War II, or the dissolvement of the USSR. And in democracies, people matter and public opinion matters, so people are more empowered. We all know and feel the technological revolution on a day-to-day basis, because we are hooked to our smartphones, communicate via social media, again, empowering people, because if in the past all of us were passive consumers of information, now we can be active and share our thoughts and so on. And the third revolution is actually in international relations, which is the privatization of so many fields that used to be owned by the state. So in economics, we see how different corporates are actually more empowered than states. But in the realm of war, we have a lot of non-state organizations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, other terror organizations, that are actually the privatization of war. And again, empowering people, empowering non-state actors. So in this reality, it affects conflict in a very wide way, but mostly in two characteristics of conflicts. The first one is that we shifted from conflicts in which the disparity between the actors involved in the conflict wasn't that big. It was symmetrical warfare, state versus a state, a group of states versus a group of states. But in today's reality, most conflicts are what we would call asymmetric conflicts. It means that states fight against non-state actors. The other major shift has to do with the information we consume from different conflicts. So in the past, it used to be very limited. Our ability to receive information was very limited. But today, with social media, with satellite capabilities, and the fact that we're all interconnected, we're actually flooded with information. We receive too much information from different conflicts around the world. So conflicts today, actually I went too fast. Conflicts today are what we would call information space conflicts, asymmetric with extensive media coverage. So when I'm thinking about asymmetric conflicts, usually we think about this sumo fighter here. We have the state that is very powerful, and it's fighting against the non-state actors that militarily is usually weaker, because the states have aircraft and submarines and other capabilities which their organizations usually don't have. But if I would ask you how long it would take this sumo fighter to crush this child, you would probably say seconds. But if I would ask you, how do you think if it will crush him or not, then I assume most of you would say no. Now, why do you think this sumo fighter wouldn't crush this child? Anybody wants to answer? What will
You're all
prevent
on
you from
mute.
doing so? Yes, Sol.
No, they're on mute. Everybody's on mute.
Okay, so it's only me here. Okay, great. So I will answer myself and say that what would we think about him if he will crush this child? We would think that he's immoral and so on. So the first of public opinion matters. And the same goes with this picture, which is from the first Intifada, but is still relevant today. The child is still the child, but instead of a sumo fighter, we have a tank that represents the state. And the minute there is a camera there, it changes the whole scenery because people around the world look at this picture and it touches their hearts and they want to save this child. And then they become part of this war. So we're talking about the weaponization of images. And images are a very powerful tool because it has a cognitive impact on the way we perceive reality because we sense that with our own senses. Very difficult in the fake news and AI era, but when we see something, we tend to believe it. And when we see something in a video or picture, since we experienced it ourselves, our chances of believing it is much wider. So when we're talking about asymmetric conflicts, geographical borders do not play any role there because anybody around the world can receive information, share information, and they're becoming part of the conflict. And when we saw the sumo fighter, I told you that the state is militarily the stronger adversary, but in the image war, we actually see reverse asymmetry effect in which the stronger adversary is usually the weaker adversary, because the weaker adversary usually have a better story of victimization. And in the Western world, the dominant narrative is a narrative of compassion. We tend to support the weaker adversary or the weaker side and feel that that allows us to balance the power play between the political actors. So we need to think about it that in the information space conflict, in the image war, the stronger side is not necessarily the stronger side in terms of images. So one last theoretical comment is that in today's reality, it's no longer just the state that is promoting messages and conducting what we would call public diplomacy or trying to make the case for their own country. We have a lot of non-state organizations, a lot of civic organizations and civic initiatives that are trying to promote the different narratives. And when we're looking at different social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X, which used to be Twitter, Telegram, and so on, we actually see a fight over narrative taking place with different hashtags, different stories of the different sides. And I should tell you that we are doing better than we did in previous rounds of the conflict, but still, in the last couple of days, it had shifted to a situation in which the Palestinians are receiving much more support on social media. So what I want to do next, that was just a very brief opening to what I want to say. What I want to do in the next few minutes is talk a little bit about what Israel and Israelis are doing in the realm of the image war. So I'll start with the official sources and I'll take two. We'll talk a little bit about what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing and what the IDF spokesperson is doing, both in traditional and social media. So when we're looking at the messages of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel, we see that in the initial stages, the messages were mostly about creating legitimacy for Israel by showing our victimization, but at the same time, delegitimizing Hamas by showing their brutality, comparing them to ISIS, and trying to create a picture or an image which will help people around the world understand why Israel cannot live alongside Hamas as a terror organization. Later on, we saw how Israel was trying to defend itself due to current events. When there was the failing launching by one of the terror organizations that hit one of the hospitals in Gaza about a week and a half ago, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs published time and time again the fact that it wasn't Israel, that it was the Palestinians that hurt their own people, and so on. One important thing that you should know about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because it's the official diplomatic branch of Israel, they're putting a lot of emphasis on diplomacy and talking about different leaders around the world and different diplomatic efforts that are being done for Israel and supporting Israel, and so on. When we're looking at the IDF, there again we see in everything that I will show you, on one hand we're trying to legitimize Israel, and on the other hand we're trying to delegitimize Hamas. So the IDF does it in various ways, and I have here a few examples. The first one, following attempts to reduce the actions of Hamas on the massacre of October 7th. And I should mention that if in the first stage, Hamas actually was very proud of its actions and published a lot of horrifying, gruesome videos, after a few days, they deleted all of them, or most of them, and they were trying to claim that it's fake. So one of the things the IDF was trying to do is to give, to provide facts of the massacre of October 7th. So they did it by releasing phone calls from terrorists to their parents, by releasing, like we see here on the screen, a note with official instructions on how you should conduct this attack. So that was one way or one message Israel was trying, or the IDF was trying to push forward. Secondly, the IDF puts a lot of effort on the distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian population. So they're trying to communicate to the world what they are trying to communicate to the Palestinians, that they should find safer areas to be in because Israel is coming in to fight Hamas. So a few days ago, they had released, again, a phone call in which IDF officer called different residents of Gaza that haven't moved to the south and asked them to go to a safer area where they will be provided with the humanitarian aid and so on. Now, UNRWA, which is the UN relief agency for Palestinians or Palestinian refugees, published a few days ago a tweet in which they're claiming that in a few hours their fuel will run out and they won't be able to give services and open hospitals and so on. I should mention that a few days before that, they published the Hamas stole their fuels, and then a few minutes later deleted this tweet. So IDF, in a very sophisticated way, understanding the power of social media, actually replied to UNRWA, showing them a picture which claims that Hamas holds 500,000 liters of fuel, and they should ask Hamas for some of its fuel to keep the services for Palestinian people. So those are examples of the official sources. On the unofficial sources, and sorry, I forgot something. They also did a really good job in traditional media, showing the scenes from the Gaza envelope area, 60-minute broadcast with a survivor who's a journalist. I don't know if you got to see this. The Telegraph published on its front page actually statement saying that it was supposed to be the most horrific picture they ever put on their front page, but they can't really put it on their front page. So people should move to page 3 to see these horrific pictures, providing them with a very powerful image. So moving from the official attempts to civic diplomacy attempts, we see that in civic diplomacy, we have two stages so far. In the first stage, Israel or Israelis were trying to push forward a message, again, comparing ISIS to Hamas, presenting the October 7th attack as the most horrific attack in modern time per capita. And I will also show you one video presenting the Israeli victimization while not showing truly horrific scenes, because it's a debate that we're having, but in this video, there aren't really any horrific scenes, but it does give you the sense of what was going on.
شوي اسكت هاتوا بسم الله الله اكبر
And those are not the most horrific videos that we have. So that was the first stage. Based on theory, we know that after a few days, people can't capture those horrific scenes anymore, and they tend not to open the videos. So we needed to change the way we communicate with the international community. And then we switched to a very effective, actually the most effective, and I'm putting an emphasis on that because I'm sure many of you are trying to communicate those messages beyond your community. But actually pushing the emotional buttons by making people or trying to make people to identify with the victims is a very effective strategy. So instead of showing them horrific pictures, if you're asking them, what would you do if it was your child being held in captivity, or if it was your mother, or if it was your sister on a live broadcast on Facebook, or where would you run, and showing them a scene from the Nova Music Festival and making them place themselves in your shoes, which is a very effective strategy. One more effective strategy that we're trying to emphasize is the Hamas is actually damaging their own people and preventing them from moving to safer areas in the south. And we have a hashtag called Free Gaza from Hamas, showing how Hamas actually doesn't hurt only Israelis, but hurts Palestinians as well. And the last video I want to show you puts an emphasis on the hostages. Again, not going to horrific pictures, going to identification, going to show us, going into showing us how those are normal people just like us. It could be us. So that is the video.
מה שאני רוצה הכי הרבה בלב
כשאין מילים את מתרגשת אתה אבא שלי
more passion
So again, not showing horrific pictures, but moving or touching the emotional buttons of people, making them identify with the victim. That is a good strategy. The only question I was able to capture from everything that was going on in the chat was how can we get those social media postings? So I will send Tali right now or after my talk a link to an amazing initiative by students of mine at Reichman University. They have an online community of over 30,000 people that work in various platforms, and they are creating content and also reporting on anti-Semitic posts, fighting delegitimization of Israel, trying to change the narrative online. And I'm going to send you a link, and each and every one of you can join this community on the platforms that you feel comfortable working on and try to make an impact and keep on sharing those stories. Do we have time for Q&As?
You know, I wish we did. We have two other speakers that also on a very short timeline. But what we would like to do is maybe ask you back again, where we will put aside much time for Q&A.
I would be very happy. I should tell you that I'm super active these days. I'm on Miluim, on reservists, and working with the family of the hostages forum, and also at Reichman University. But it is super important, and I would love to spare some of my time and come to speak to you again. And thank you so much for your support. And please do whatever you can to share those stories, and also do whatever you can to keep your communities safe. It's just as important.